So, as I mentioned earlier, we are breaking format, a historical moment for this podcast. Uh, we've brought in our good friend who you hear every episode giving us amazing information, Mr. Martin Popoff from up in the frozen tundra land, which I know it's not now, but it normally is.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for having me. This is very cool.
Yeah, so welcome to the show. And what we're going to do today is Martin's going to do his little spiel that he normally does, and then we're going to have him as our guest. And we'll talk for a while about this amazing song. So I will now turn the floor over to you to start, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, pretty cool. So you've picked Gates of Babylon as an important song, and definitely it is. So we're up into the third Rainbow album here, produced by Martin Birch. It's an interesting length, 6:49. So it's actually not a super long song. So it's not an epic like Light in the Black or Stargazer, but it's long enough and enough stuff goes on it. Not a lot of lyrics in it. It sounds a little bit like the Stargazer Wizard more than anything, talking in this song. It's kind of got an Egypto theme to go with the sort of Egypto music. So as I mentioned, Long Live Rock and Roll. This is April 14th, 1978. They recorded this at the Chateau d'Araville, France. As I mentioned, Martin Birch. We've got some different players on this album, but it's ascertained that the bass player on this song is, in fact, Bob Daisley, who's also on Kill the King and Sensitive to Light. And we've got David Stone. So David Stone, apparently, like Canadian, came up with the middle eight section. He wrote that, but he is also the synthesizer player at the beginning. So we've got this sort of Tarot Woman-like synthesizer intro on this song. It actually sounds like a synthesizer player playing a guitar solo in a way. It's kind of interesting. We've got orchestration throughout. This is Rainer Peitsch. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. We've got the strings, Bavarian Strings Ensemble, all throughout the whole thing. Haunting kind of little gypsy violin thing to end it. But yeah, it's very Egyptian sounding. I remember getting this as a new release as a kid and thinking, it's an okay song. It's not heavy enough for me. It's not particularly heavy. It's a little bouncy, but it's very evil. We like that about it. But yeah, it's got a slowing down halftime section. Got a long guitar solo from Ritchie that starts out it's a little tentative, not the greatest guitar solo. It starts out okay, then gets kind of awkward and slow. It's always snaky sounding, but then it kind of picks up and gets cool. It's got a lot of soloing in it. But yeah, pretty darn important song in the catalog. I think it's their Sales of Sharon, essentially. This album kind of lines up for me very much like a Taken by Force, Scorpions, where it's got this dominant, very ambitious sort of song, and then the rest of it is not that important. Some of it, I mean, it's a great album, but yeah, I think this song is considered sort of the masterpiece on this album, the carryover that has the most kind of Rainbow Rising spirit to it.
Yeah, so we haven't talked Rainbow yet on this podcast, but they are, to me, one of the most influential bands that came from the 70s. And obviously, if you talk to anybody that's a metal fan, whether they're 19 years old or 68 years old or whatever it is, everybody loves Rainbow. Rising is, of course, the classic record, and we'll for sure get to that at some point going on here, and we'll probably do another track off of here too, because Kill the King is also an important song. But I've always loved this song because, again, like you said, it came out in 1978, and it sounds like something you could have heard two years ago that came out, because it's very progressive. Yeah. It's got a lot of ambiance to it, and you talk to so many musicians, and I can't play a thing, so I adhere to them. But, this is one of those kind of almost early prog metal records. And, Rainbow in general was very proggy in their days with Ronnie James Dio, which was, of course, the pinnacle of the Rainbow stuff. But this one, yeah, there's a lot of things going on. And, you mentioned the guitar solo. And, Blackmore is just such a brilliant guitar player. You're certainly top 5 of all time for me. And he's, it starts out, he does these kind of weird solo things, and then he just goes kind of insane. And I know, again, talking to guitar players, solos like that are extremely difficult to play. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. But when I go back on it, I talk to different people about this song particularly. Everybody's like, "Oh my God, I heard that song. I was like, there was so much going on. It's amazing."
Hmm. Yeah, it's another funny thing about this album, and how this song fits on here. I mean, you've got these serious songs. This one, "Kill the King," definitely, but a lot of people put down "Down to Earth," which I considered my favorite Rainbow album, actually. Um, but people say it's very commercial, and then I always come back and say, well, this has got L.A. Connection on it. It's got a completely quiet ballad on it. It's got "Sensitive to Light." The Shed can be a little commercial. "Long Live Rock and Roll" could be a little commercial. And then "Rising," our good friend Monty Connor always kind of puts down "Rising" somewhat when he says, you know what, but it does have "Do You Close Your Eyes" and "Starstruck," which are kind of stupid. And then he says those are like 2 out of 6 songs on the whole album, sort of thing. So and then of course we know the first Rainbow album has a lot of commercial music on it. So I'm really of a mind that all 4 of these, I'll put "Rising" aside a little bit. I don't think "Rising's" very commercial, but I think the first album, the third album, and "Down to Earth" are really pretty similar in how much non-heavy metal is on them. So yeah,
Well, and you're right about that, because
yeah.
what was going on was that excuse me, Richie Blackmore wanted a hit song.
Yeah.
And that's ultimately what led to Dio leaving, was that, Dio wanted to write, what Dio likes to write. And they didn't see eye to eye with that. And Richie's like, I want to have a big hit. And, and that's why this record was a little bit more commercial, and why you have "Long Live Rock and Roll." They thought, well, maybe this will be the big hit. And it didn't go the way Richie wanted it to be. So he wanted to get a more commercial singer and be more commercial, which they did with Rainbow. Obviously, after Dio left, it became much more commercial, and a whole bunch of, radio songs and stuff, which I mean, I don't know why he wanted to go that way. I guess he just wanted the massive success in the US that he had before. But it's really a shame, because those early early Rainbow records, were just so amazing. And if they would have kept going in that direction, I could only imagine how good it would have been. But we'll never know.
Yeah, and I can't believe, I mean, it's always surprising to me that none of these records even achieved gold status in the States. I mean, it's crazy. I bet "Rising's" probably there if you start working the Spotify numbers and everything to it, right?
Yeah, I would imagine so. Now it's it's so difficult to figure out, what exact sales are these days for those sort of things. But yeah, I mean, but that's the thing, is they were a kind of an underground sensation back then. And, people who knew and loved it, but it didn't have the commercial, viability that I guess Blackmore wanted. But of course, it worked out pretty well for Ronnie Dio. He ended up going to Black Sabbath and had a decent run there, and of course Dio. But this was really kind of his first, obviously, big thing, and he was just such an amazing singer. I love the the themes that he talks about, the historical themes and stuff, went so well with this kind of music, because Blackmore, as we know, is extremely influenced by classical. And so much of these Rainbow songs, forget the blues or anything else, they're really based on classical guitars and classical instrumentation, hence the strings and all the other stuff. And that's kind of what, when I talk to people about, and you can probably relate, when you talk to people, like, where does metal come from? So metal comes from, of course, first the blues, that's number one, but really second is classical. And the third, for me, and I really wouldn't have thought this until a few yeard ago, especially doing this podcast and talking to guys like Dave Lombardo, jazz. Like, so much of what Lombardo does as a drummer, we're talking about him, and I've had other drummers say this to me as well, is that jazz was a huge influence on them, and the kind of the swing that you get with metal, which I found really interesting.
Yeah. How would you characterize what Cozy Powell does on this album?
Yeah, I think that there's definitely, you've got some of that jazz swing, which I, again, never would have really thought that way, but it's kind of there. But he's also, another brilliant part of this, and another massive influence on drummers, because he's playing, this stuff is so, like I said, it's so proggy. And back then there was a lot, you had Yes and all that stuff, but there wasn't a lot of heavy proggy stuff, which is kind of what this was. And if you talk to guys like Mike Portnoy, for example, cite this as a huge influence as to, how they ended up playing, and how their styles became their styles.
Yeah. How about the production? Being no stranger to production yourself, what do you think of the Martin Birch job on this thing?
Well, Martin Birch is my all-time favorite producer, and he's literally produced probably half of my top 20 records are all produced by Martin Birch. So, I worship anything that he does. Although I think on this record, it's classical Martin Birch production, I think, and it sounds pretty much like a Martin Birch produced record. But I listened to it the other day again because I hadn't listened to it for a while, just to kind of refresh it. And I noticed that there was not a lot of lower end to it, and to the guitars especially, which I mean, Richie always played the Fender Strats, which don't get a really heavy rhythm sound to them necessarily. So I kind of missed a little bit of that. But overall, it's a great sounding record, and Dio sounds
Yeah,
great.
he likes an urgent sort of mid-range punchy sound, and I think that's what you get on it. You even get that on Rising. I've argued that Rising even is the start of the Mac sound, the Reinhold Mac sound. He's thanked on Rising. He's not listed as an engineer on Rising, but it sounds so Munich land Mac. I mean, it is Munich land, Munich. Yeah, Mac isn't particularly involved, but I feel like that's one of those early albums where you get that Mac slap, and I think that slap is missing from this one. It's more that punchy, almost punky sort of mid-range or urgent mid-range sort of sound. It never bothered me, but I don't think it's particularly dynamic. I think it is missing some low end and even missing some high end.
Yeah, and again, I love Martin Birch, but but like I said, everything he's done pretty much is masterfully produced. But you could kind of feel the other thing that I noticed about this record that I kind of going back and listening to it again, was the third Rainbow record aside from the live album, obviously. And you could kind of feel that there's a lot of tension in the band at this point. A lot of guys coming in and out, and you could kind of feel it on it, and it's because it's like you said, it's got some really commercial stuff to it, and then it's got these other, Kill the King, which is another legendary song, and another early speed metal song basically, and then you have this Gates of Babylon, super progressive, but then the other stuff, and you could kind of, it almost felt like two records, like where for me Rising was, aside from maybe Do Your Close Your Eyes, which I don't mind at all, but that record is just absolute brilliance from the beginning of it, and this one kind of, you could feel what wasn't quite there, and I don't think you could feel that everyone wasn't really on the same page.
Yeah, LA Connection. I always considered that like a Nazareth song for some reason.
Kind of.
Yeah, and then we've got Lady of the Lake, which is your redo of Wanton song off of Physical Graffiti kind of thing. I love that one. I mean, to me, my favorites are Lady of the Lake, Kill the King, and Gates of Babylon for sure.
Yeah, I do like The Shed a lot for some reason. I always thought that was a cool song, just because it's a little bit different, but it definitely has that interesting feel. But again, and I would have loved. I've never talked to Richie Blackmore in my entire life. Not many people have, but and I don't know. I know he doesn't like to talk about the old stuff as well, but I'd love to get inside his head to what he was thinking, because obviously, coming from Deep Purple and this massive band, and one of the most influential bands of all time, them Sabbath and Zeppelin are the three pillars of where heavy metal started from, basically. And then to leave Purple and start Rainbow, where he was just doing so many different interesting things. And maybe I'm just thinking that in Purple, for some reason towards the end, he was being constrained a little bit by the other guys in the band, and he's like, I want to go out and do my own thing, which obviously he did. But it's so fascinating, because you had like you just mentioned some commercial stuff, but then this incredibly difficult and longer, epic, proggy songs, and just all sorts of stuff going on, all sorts of layers happening. It was really fascinating, because again, to me, this is kind of the first real prog metal band was Rainbow.
Yeah. It's funny. I coaxed a fair bit of stuff out of Richie on a few occasions on old stuff, but at one point I remember he goes. I asked him a question. He goes, "I forget," and that was my cue to get back on the Blackmore's Night album we were supposed to be talking about, kind of things. That is funny, but yeah, he's got pretty interesting views on all this. Great album cover too. I mean, the album cover is very classical, right?
Yeah,
that's the cover.
Yeah, that was phenomenal, and that was like Aerosmith's "Draw the Line," the same. I think it was the same artist as well, which is pretty cool. But yeah, the cover
is it? Okay, yeah. And famously, we know that the Gatefold is taken at a Rush show, not a Rainbow show, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
You had to get the Canadian stuff in there. I get it. Yeah. We had to put some CanCon in. I get it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Funny.
So another interesting thing about Richie Blackmore. So MTV back in the day did the 100 greatest hard rock bands of all time. And our entry from Metal Blade was the band that we were working with at the time that we all know and love, King's X. They came in at number 83, which I was shocked about, but very happy.
Nice. Yeah.
So the special comes out, and I didn't, this is back in the days where they don't send out promo copies or advanced versions of anything other than we knew they were in there. But the way they did that was they would have another celebrity musician come in and talk about the band. And shockingly to me, the guy that came on and spent about 3 or 4 minutes going on and on about how great King's X was Richie Blackmore.
Wow, that is so cool. What a great story.
It's amazing because he would be,
great.
he, like I said, he doesn't do back then. He didn't do a lot of press, and he didn't really talk about a lot of other bands or anything. But all of a sudden, here's Richie Blackmore going on about how much he loves King's X, and it makes sense because King's X kind of has, I'm obviously massively influenced by Rainbow and all the stuff that Richie did, but it kind of had that sensibility of just different elements to it, which made it amazing, but also made it not as popular as they should have been.
Yeah, wicked. Yeah, every time I listen to King's X, I almost picture in my mind what would, thinking of the grunge guys hearing Out of the Silent Planet or Gretchen for the first time and just listening to that and marveling at the amazing songwriting on these. I play King's X all the time still. When I'm driving around in the car, it's like a go-to band, eh? Tapehead especially. I love Tapehead. I love Pound Hound.
Yeah. Oh, good. That's all of our stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, I know it is. Yeah.
Well, it's funny you mentioned all the grunge people, because Chris Cornell was one of the biggest King's X fans ever. Like, I remember one show they played in LA and Cornell was there, and afterwards Doug was saying I was freaking out the whole show because Chris Cornell was right front of the stage, right in front of Doug Pinnigan, bowing at him like most of the show.
That's nuts.
Doug's like, what is happening here?
Yeah.
And, the Pearl Jam guys are massive fans. But all those bands became massive fans. I mean, some of the Pearl Jam guys were supposed to do something with Doug at some point, like some project thing that I guess never actually happened. But yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that because all those grunge bands were monster King's X fans.
Yeah, wicked. Yeah, very cool. Well, yeah, hopefully we do some more Rainbow on the show. That'd be awesome.
Oh no, that's going to be what we have to do. I put them together as one song, which is Light in the Black and Stargazer. Those two. That's just one long song to me. I can't separate them. So
interesting.
That's going to be one. We're going to tackle that as one song, and then of course Kill the King. We're going to have to do as well.
Nice.
Maybe we'll get to something off the first record. We'll see. It's a lot, it's a lot that I don't want to focus too much on one single band, which gets difficult for me because
I know you won't include it, but I always have to argue this one to the death that my favorite Rainbow song is Lost in Hollywood. I just marvel at that song, how they throw every trick at the book at that song in a short space of time. I think it's Cozy Powell's greatest performance. I love the little classical break in it. It's heavy, it's melodic, it's fast. I just think they just do such a great job of that song. The only reason people have a blind spot about it, I swear, is the dumb title, because you don't think of Rainbow as a Hollywood band, right? So it's got this stupid title, but other than that, it is just an absolute barnstormer it's like a Kill the King or a Gates of Babylon. It's got a lot of that European classical sensibility in it.
Yeah, sure. Well, I mean, there's so many great Rainbow songs, but I go back to, again, what I'm trying to do with this show is, I guess, partly educate people that, maybe don't know about, because when you think like, okay, well, we're going to talk about that 100. Okay, we're going to talk about, just all the stuff that you would normally talk about. But there's so many other bands that really shaped how metal became metal, and on all this, I grew up in the 70s, so I'm a little bit biased to that, but that really is the beginning of everything. We talk about the big stuff, but then all these other bands, Thin Lizzy is another one that, every single band, and they might be arguably one of the most influential of all the bands, just because of the songwriting and the style, and of course the twin guitar players, which really at that point nobody was really doing. So yeah, just good stuff. But it's fun to do that. It's fun to talk with the people about all the songs and get people various aspects of stuff. And bottom line is, for me, it's fun because I just get to talk to my friends about music, which is what I do all the time anyway.
Well, the way you do this formula, I hope you get Richie Blackmore on the show for this song. So yeah,
good luck with that. Although he has been talking more lately about the older stuff, and he played those, you know, those few Rainbow dates as well. So
Yeah.
you never know, but
Yeah.
that would be amazing. But I don't know. I would probably also be very nervous about that. So
Yeah. Very cool. Very cool.
so many people I'm nervous around, but the two people that I would be nervous around would be Tony Iommi and Richie Blackmore. Anybody else is like not a big deal, but.
Well, you have enough pull to be able to get Richie Blackmore. Come on, seriously. It's I can't see him saying no to you if you just write a nice little letter and send it over to Carol. And yeah.
Well, we'll see. You never know. That's like pie in the sky stuff for me. Like I said, I just, you know, he hasn't talked a lot about the old stuff, so I don't know where his head's at with that. Because I know for a long time he didn't want to talk about it or play it. He just didn't play anything. But then he finally went back and did those Rainbow shows again, which were actually pretty cool. I almost went to one. I think Lars went to one because, you know, Lars also a massive fan. So
yeah,
I think he went to one. I think we talked about it later. It was good. I mean, you know, it's as good as it can be all these years later, obviously. But
actually, one last thing I want to just struck me about Gates of Babylon. It reminds me of a cross between Trampled Underfoot and Kashmir. If you take those two off of Physical Graffiti, shove them together, you know, you got the stilted, funky rhythm of Trampled Underfoot, and then you've got your Kashmir tones, right? The famous Led Zeppelin Egypto song kind of thing.
Yeah, it definitely has that vibe to it, and of course, I would also be one. We would love to talk to either Richie or Ronnie. Unfortunately, we can't do that. About did the song was it written by Richie first music and then Ronnie came with the lyrics, or was it the opposite? Because it does have that Egyptian feel, not just the lyrics, obviously, but the music too. So I'm kind of curious about that as to where that came from. Was it the lyrics that Ronnie had and said, "Hey, I got this song. What do you think?" And then Richie wrote the music. Generally, from what I understand, the way Rainbow worked was that Richie would do the music kind of first, and then Ronnie would come in afterwards.
Yeah, that strikes me as most reasonable. Yeah.
Yeah, that's usually the way it was, but it's also possible because I've heard it, you know, even with when Ronnie was in Sabbath, sometimes that he would come up with lyrics and then they would work on the song from there. So that would be interesting because it has that. I mean, and Ronnie's always had Egyptian stuff, you know, he had the song Egypt, you know, and Dio and stuff.
Actually, one other thing that I find, you know, that makes this song so good is there's a lot of time spent on, you've got a verse, you've got a pretty extensive pre-chorus, and then you've got a chorus, which isn't really a chorus. So you almost got like two pre-choruses or two choruses, however you want to slice it. But it's got these two long sections that are as long as the verse section. So it's got these three things going around, and then you've got the break and everything too. So any time a band spends a lot of time on a pre-chorus, I think that helps build a strong song.
Yeah, and again, it just brings in that whole prog stuff that really they were so good at the, like. I mean, I love epic songs anywhere. Those are all my favorite songs, but they were really good at that. Like I said, this was, you know, one of the most important precursors to what now we would call prog metal. I mean, there's a million bands that started that too, but I think Rainbow kind of perfected it in the late 70s, mid to late 70s, I guess it was, aside from, you know, the big ones. Quick funny Dio story, since we're talking about Dio.
Yeah,
I can't remember if I talked about this on the show before, but it's one of my favorite Dio stories. So I was backstage at an Iron Maiden show in LA at the Forum, and Ronnie was there, and I was talking to him about a few things, and he's like, was one of the nicest people on the planet, just a genuinely nice man. So we're talking about stuff. And I said, "Hey, are you aware?" So one of the greatest 10 days of my life, I spent 10 days in England in 1984. And I went to two Dio shows, and then I went to two Maiden shows on the World Slavery Tour. They were within like 4 or 5 days of each other. So I went to the two Dio shows, and of course, it's the Egyptian theme. Like the whole stage is all Egyptian and stuff. And then here, cut to 5 days later, I go to Iron Maiden. It's all Egyptian stuff. And I was asking Ronnie, I said, when you guys were doing that tour, did you realize that Maiden also had an Egyptian theme to their production? And he laughed. He said, "No, I didn't know that." But then this is also interesting. So as a fan, this is the first time I'd ever been to Hammersmith Odeon. And, you know, as a kid growing up, I was like, "Oh my God, all these great shows are there. It's amazing." And I thought it was, you know, like Long Beach Arena, this big arena. It's only like 3,000 people. It's this tiny venue, but it's like this, you know, legendary place. So Ronnie went off on like, hated that venue. I hated playing there. It was horrible. There was like no elevators, it was all stairs. Like everybody had to bring the equipment up the stairs, and I felt bad for the crew and just about how old and the conditions in the back and the rooms were terrible and just all this stuff. And I'm like sitting there going, oh my God, this is like one of the most legendary venues of all time. And one of these great shows. And from his perspective, it's terrible.
Crazy.
So, yeah, it's always different when you're on stage when you're in the crowd. That's for sure. But
no, that never struck me about them both doing the Egyptian thing. That's funny.
Yeah, well, I was like I said, I saw it both in a week, and it was literally almost the exact same production set. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And they had, of course, neither of them had any idea. And this is long before YouTube or the internet or any of that stuff, so you wouldn't really know anyway.
Yeah. I'll show you my there's my Rising that I pulled out with the three passed on people on it. We've got Ronnie on there, Jimmy Bain, and Ken Kelly, who did the cover art, right?
Wow.
Down in green on there. Yeah.
That is very nice.
So
yeah, well, Ken Kelly is one of my all-time favorite artists, and we had the immense privilege of him doing the 20th anniversary box set, Metal Blade box set. He did an original cover for us there, which is amazing. Nice. I should have, when he did it, he offered like, do you want to buy it? I'm like, sure, but I forget it was some crazy amount of money back then.
Right.
I never did it. When he passed, they were putting a bunch of his stuff on sale, and that was one of them. But it was like $30,000.
Wow.
I'm not a big. I mean, I love art, but I'm not a big guy spending a lot of money on art. So, but now,
do you know where Rising is? Do you know where Rising ended up?
That I do not know. I want to say, did Blackmore keep it? I can't remember. I don't really know.
Yeah,
that would be one to get, but that unfortunately wasn't on the estate sale, sadly.
Yeah. Crazy.
But he was great to work with, and like I said, one of my all-time favorite guys. He was another one I couldn't believe when we reached out to him and said, "Hey, I'd like you to do this cover for this box set." He's like, "Yeah, sure." And he really did an amazing piece of art, and it was pretty reasonable, because that was the other thing I was worried about. Is, oh my God, it's going to cost some insane amount of money. But it was reasonable, and we're like, okay, let's do it. It'll be fun. So that was
nice. Great. Good job. Cool.
Every once in a while, we get lucky to get to work with our favorite people.
Yeah. Very cool.
But yeah, so Rainbow, again, I can't underscore how important this band was to all of the metal stuff that came, and just how influential they were. Look at Kerry King. He's constantly wearing a Rainbow Rising shirt. So good man. Yeah. There's a pretty funny thing going around. I think it was part of he's doing his promo for the solo record, his new record, and they were asking him like, this song or this album or Rainbow Rising, and it went through some pretty big albums, and Kerry's answer was always like Rainbow Rising.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah, you can find that on YouTube somewhere. It's great.
Yeah, I feel like all of these what I call like the second wave metal bands, which would be Rush, Thin Lizzy, UFO, Rainbow, Judas Priest, are the biggest influences on the new wave of British heavy metal and on the thrash people. So they're a massive influence on all the metal guys that basically started in 79 clear through to starting times in the mid 80s sort of thing. So most of the people who made metal eventually who are kind of our age, not older, not younger, but roughly our age, I think the big inspiration was this second wave, this sort of 75 through 79 wave of bands.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely 100%. But the great thing that I've noticed about the younger kids, kind of starting in the early 2000s with that metalcore scene, like they really went back and did their homework on the history. I remember some of the guys from some of the bands would go like, hey, make me a Thin Lizzy best of CD, or make me a Rainbow best of CD, because they wanted to learn. And they all loved it. And even today, we've got some bands that are 20-something-year-old kids that are doing amazing stuff. And same thing, they go back to like, I love old Rainbow, I love old UFO, old Rush, all that stuff. So it's cool to see the generations come and go. And it's not just, the 2 or 3 generations after that were into it. Now it's even the newer generations that are going back and going, yeah, that music is amazing, and I love that stuff. And I know a lot of it was their parents playing it to them, which good parenting. Thank you very much, people. But however it works, but I just love that all this music stands the test of time, and it's still being it's still influencing people today in their 20s and late teens even.
Yeah, and I like your point of including Gates of Babylon as a progressive metal song. So we can include Rainbow. I mean, Rainbow often doesn't get included in that. Another band that doesn't get included as much is Uriah Heep. So you put Heep, Rainbow, you can put Priest in there, and of course Rush. Rush is like the big one, right?
Well, yeah, of course. Yeah.
And then that's your basis for progressive metal right there.
Yeah, I think Uriah Heep doesn't get the love that they get in the States. I mean, obviously they're huge in Europe. I mean, King Diamond's biggest influence is David Byron, the singer of Uriah Heep. He named his kid Byron after David Byron. So
wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
cool.
It's a huge influence to him, and so many people in Europe. But I think over here in the States, they just didn't quite. It was like them and Status Quo were two bands that were massively huge, specifically in the UK, but also in Europe, that never really quite got so big over here.
Well, but he did have those gold records. I mean,
Yes.
they had
a couple hits.
Demons, Magician's Birthday is gold, Sweet Freedom is gold. I think the live album went gold. So they did all right. They sold a lot of tickets. So, but it's so long ago, right? And it was a short run. Then it fell off immediately. So, whereas Quo didn't get a single gold record. And
they never transferred over here. I was the same thing with them. I liked them and respected them, but I wasn't a huge fan. Man, you go to England. I think they also were playing when I was over in England. Maybe not the first time, maybe the second time. People were like, you go to Status Quo? Like, I don't know. They were selling out like 8 nights or something at Hammersmith Odeon. Some insane amount of shows. It was crazy.
Did I ever tell you my favorite 20 seconds of music of all time is by Status Quo. It is in Backwater, where they come out of that long solo section. It's kind of like goofy solo section, and then they lapse into another verse of the song late in the song, and you can detect a small speeding up that goes on, and it's just so absolutely powerful. So this is the first track on Status Quo, right? 1974.
Interesting.
I love that. That is literally my favorite 20 seconds of music. Just listening to that guitar solo, and then it just collapses into this extra verse, and it's just the energy is so elevated when they do that. And actually, I've said this, for whatever reason, maybe it's because that's my favorite 20 seconds of music, but they kind of do the same thing to almost the same effect on Little Lady. Down Down is incredibly powerful by that band. I just think that band, when they're on for those few seconds, when they're absolutely completely on, no one can touch them, kind of thing.
I love that you picked out a specific 20, my favorite 20 seconds of music. It's one thing I don't think I could do is pick 20 seconds, but I'll have to go back and listen to that because that's pretty impressive. All right. So Martin, how many books have you written so far?
I guess about 135 at this point. I just signed up for 3 more yesterday, actually.
So yeah, Martin Popoff has written almost 138 books now about hard rock and heavy metal. Which is there anybody even close to that? There can't be anybody within any.
There's some people catching up. Boy, I think Greg Prado, I saw something said he's done 48 books now.
No, okay.
So he's done that in a big hurry, right?
He's only 90 behind you then.
Yeah. And then Dave Thompson, I used to think, I remember thinking a long time ago, I can't believe Dave Thompson's done almost 100 books. It's just insane, right? But I don't know if he's still cranking them out, but we're probably pretty close now.
Do you have a favorite book that you've written?
I do love the where I get to analyze every single song by a band thing. So that Led Zeppelin, all the albums, all the songs, and the Damned one I did, and the Clash one I did are way up there. And I do like that Who Invented Heavy Metal book too. I think that's just a riot. 120,000 words that ends in 1971. So that's a lot of fun as well.
And who did you come up with that invented heavy metal?
Well, it's definitely Black Sabbath. But what I did is to make the book a little longer, and I actually had a deep point to make here. So the reason I ended it at the end of 1971 is I wanted to make sure that Black Sabbath was intentional over and above Deep Purple. So I wanted to get to the point where we could compare Master of Reality to Fireball. And then at Fireball, you're at the point where you're saying, these guys like their heavy rock. They certainly don't want to be called heavy metal, but they dabble in other things as well. So Black Sabbath are the ones that doubled down and proved through 3 very heavy albums.
Yeah.
Black Sabbath being the least heavy, but Paranoid and Master of Reality. By the time you get to Master of Reality, that thing is just a bulldozer.
I mean, look, it is Sabbath, obviously, but a lot of people go back and I've discussed it with a million of my friends because Blue Cheer was kind of the first band that really invented the sound, more or less, of a guitar going through a Marshall amp and with all the distortion and everything. So that was the first band that got the sound. That was 67, I think it was.
I think it comes out in 68, but the neat thing about Blue Cheer as an answer is they put out 2 albums in 68, and even the second album is even more impressive than the first album, Outside Inside Over Vincibus Eruptum, right? So yeah, when you have to name a second band, you go to Blue Cheer, I think.
Yeah, they're probably the one. Like I said, they're the ones that kind of perfected the sound. But obviously, Iommi and Sabbath, they created the genre, really, because it was there. Another band that I love to talk about the early stuff that I think also was amazing was Sir Lord Baltimore. Like they had some unbelievably heavy stuff in 1969 and 1970. It's just incredible.
But still, I tend to go to I tend to go to Black Sabbath 1, Paranoid. I include Uriah Heep, Very Heavy, Very Humble, which is also 1970, and I definitely include In Rock. And I often say that of the 4 albums in 1970, In Rock is even better than either of the Sabbaths, but Sabbath had 2.
Yeah. I think that In Rock's a better album, maybe per se, but the classic Sabbath sound, I mean, that's really where it all came from. So it's amazing. Well, cool. Always great to see you and talk to you. We could talk for hours about metal, and we have before. So but we have time restrictions today. But thanks for doing this. It was fun to get you on this part of the show. And thanks again, man. We appreciate it. Thank you for also all you do with the show. All the stuff you've given us for all the episodes. Really appreciate that too.
Wicked, awesome. Yeah,
thanks, man.
See you again. All right.
You can't.